So thank you very much for being here today to listen to the real officer and a gentleman, our hero, who has agreed to come and talk to us at BIC about his personal experiences, specifically his experience at Siachen. I think it's become almost cliche to talk about, the sacrificial soldier who risks his life so that we can be safe. But I think that to see somebody really in flesh and blood who has actually done that, and not just to see him, but to also acknowledge their family who goes through the stress so that we don't have any. Um, our country's wars have been well known and well documented. And at the eve of Independence Day, I think we all get very excited about our freedom struggle, and we acknowledge the soldier and the non-soldier who has contributed in making our country free, giving our country identity and some direction. And those are the times as we see these documented wars. I mean, some of these wars are actually sort of found on social media, and the conventional media follows it, documents it, and it's almost like watching a live entertainment. And in such times, we are roused to high levels of nationalism, and people are glued to televisions and newspapers. But the interesting thing about today's talk is that it covers a time when you and I slept well, secure in the knowledge that everything is fine, but the country was under threat. Just to anticipate what the book says, it was in the year 1987 when a brigade-size force, and the thing is that while many of you know what a brigade is, but I just want to emphasize that a brigade is a size of 3,000 soldiers. And these 3,000 soldiers, a brigade-size force, led by General Pervez Musharraf, who went on to becoming, as we know, the president of Pakistan, such a strong 3,000 people, soldiers of Pakistan, led by General Musharraf, went on to attack the Siachen glacier, intending to take control. And the only reason that a part of our country at that time wasn't taken away was because it was defended by a small group. Can we even guess what the number was of that small group? 15 to 20 Indian soldiers who were there guarding a few posts. This incident lost face for General Musharraf, and it took him 10 years to launch a war that we do know about, which is the Kargil War, as a means to seek revenge for his defeat of 1987. The Indian commander in charge of that operation in 1987 was Lieutenant General Ramesh Kulkarni, our speaker for the day. It wasn't the only battle that was fought in the defense of the country in 1987-88. And the challenges, both physical and geographical, that he and his men went through, it is important that we recognize it, we understand it, and maybe we need to know it all the time. But at the eve of our independence, it becomes all the more important that we keep track of this. So I'd like to formally introduce Lieutenant General Kulkarni, who was commissioned in the Garhwal Rifle Infantry in June 1956. General Kulkarni commanded a battalion of the Garhwal Rifles in high-altitude areas of Arunachal Pradesh in 1971 to 73, and an infantry brigade in the northern areas of Nagaland in counter-insurgency environments of 1981 to 1983. He went on to command an infantry division from 1987 to 1989 He was responsible for the northern borders of Jammu and Kashmir in Ladakh, from Kargil to the Karakoram Pass, with a focus on the Siachen glacier. Siachen 1987, the book that is exhibited outside, is a narrative of this period of his tenure to ensure that we don't forget. General Kulkarni has also held many staff and instructional assignments and retired as the adjunct general at the Army headquarters in 1992-93. In the course of his tenure, General Kulkarni was the recipient of the Param Vishisht Seva Medal, the Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, and Ati Vishisht Seva Medal. Post his retirement, General Kulkarni was appointed as the chairman of the Ceasefire Monitoring Group to enforce and monitor the ceasefire between the Government of India and the National Socialist Council of Nagaland. This was followed by him being appointed as the chairman of the Ceasefire Supervisory Board to enforce and supervise the ceasefire between the Government of India and the Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland. He held both these posts concurrently for a 7-year period from 2001 and was granted the rank and status of a serving Lieutenant General Army Commander. I'd also like to take a minute to introduce his daughter, Anjali Karpe, who has been instrumental in the completion of this project of writing the book Siachen 1987. Anjali is presently the deputy head and head of student life of the Bombay International School in Mumbai and teaches English literature and history to secondary and high school students. The book is a labor of love that Anjali and her father have worked on. While the memories and experiences are completely personal to General Kulkarni, the articulation and expression has come together through all the conversations, discussions, as well as arguments that both of them have had in the course of writing that book. May I now please request General Kulkarni and Anjali Karpe to please come on the dais and take us through the experiences. General Kulkarni will speak to us with Anjali aiding that conversation, after which we can perhaps have a little bit of Q&A till the time permits. I will moderate. I will invite you to ask the questions by coming up to the mic that will be set up for it. General Kulkarni, all yours.
So before Dad takes over, and he is going to actually take the stage for most of this evening, I just want to say that the reason we are here is because he agreed to write about this. I think the only regret that both of us, my mother, our family has is that we should have done it a little sooner. But I think it's better late than never. I know that as a child of an army, in an army family, there are certain things that are taken for granted, and it's only when I got married outside of the force that I discovered so much of a disconnect. Every time my father would get impatient, and when he was asked how many tanks we have, and are we in a position to defeat Pakistan if it attacks. These are words that he used. He would get very irritated, but I used to tell him, there is a reason. Somebody needs to tell a lot of stories. Somebody needs to talk a lot more about the army so that you're not asked these questions. So over to you, Dad, for a time when, honestly, even I slept rather peacefully. I met my husband, Nina, that time. We got engaged in 1987. Pretty miraculous that Dad made it for our wedding to give me away in 1988. Over to you, Dad.
Good evening, everybody. I thank BIC, the director and the whole of their office for inviting me for this talk. And it's a great pleasure to interact with the august and intellectual gathering at Bangalore, because I think the crowd I am interacting to this evening is a very different than what I have done it so far elsewhere, and it is a pleasure indeed. All of us are very conscious about when the subject of national security comes up, wars take place, and the events of the border are highlighted, blown up adequately or otherwise by the media. And there is a media which reaches out to the people to make them understand what is happening. Otherwise, there is no way normal average citizen has got any access of what is happening around on the battlefields or the front lines. And, that is how practically every citizen, like at your age, is fully aware of what happened in the various conflicts, the wars that took place with Pakistan or otherwise. First war with Pakistan, 47, 48, immediately after independence, 65, 71, Kargil, the Chinese aggression about 62, the Galwan incident that took place. All of you are fully, I think, are in parts knowledgeable what happened there, what are the level of the conflict that took place. But you are also aware of what happened in 1987 in Sri Lanka, the Indian armies when it went there. But I am not very sure what I am putting across this evening, the nature of threat to India's borders and security were ever conveyed by the media, were made aware of the major portions of the defense services also. I look back at the newspapers of 1987-88 period. There was a time when, based on the defense briefing, the media people like Inder Malhotra and others recorded it in the newspapers that time with the long articles saying, after 71, India faced the biggest threat and challenge for the national security on the glacier, Siachen glacier area in 87. But why isn't it known to people? I think one of the things which happened was in 1987, Sri Lanka operations were in full steam. And the whole country, army, armed forces, politicians, everybody was looking at Sri Lanka, what is happening or what's not happening and what should be happening. Siachen glacier sector was nobody's special interest, I would say. Things were taken for granted, things will happen there. Minor, maybe. We'll look after it subsequently. Or if it success was perhaps at times even taken for granted, that yes, it will happen, we have got enough strength, firepower, everything. But, where the threat is such that the national boundaries are threatened to be changed, I think that threat is of a different nature. And this is what was happening in Siachen in 87. I'm going to put across perspective as I saw from my experiences, because this is the period I was the senior-most commander to look after the sector, unbelievably disconnected and unwieldy, Zurjela Pass to Karakoram Pass, the entire northern sector. And look back at the map now, I wondered, how did I manage it? How did I handle it? There is something called destiny and luck factors also. Now, what happened during that period is not known to even the students of military history. Leave aside people being aware of the common citizens. And as I said, it is Sri Lanka was the one which attracted all or focused all the attention. Recently, there have been proliferation of writing and the books, and the writing of books, articles on Siachen by a number of people. Mostly people who, some of them are for the media, some people who have become experts by research, carrying out a research by interacting with the man on the ground, soldiers, or the junior leaders who were present there, or by the record keepers like headquarters, what is the record of that particular period? And based on that, they have written these accounts. I read each one of them. I had a fortune of reading what Pakistan Army and Pakistan writers, military writers, have recorded about these events. Not many would have the access to that Pakistani writing. It is in the defense journals, and those journals are no longer available here. But I had an access and I read that. I said, if everybody can write by Google search or interaction with the soldier in the front line, or even the Pakistanis can put up a particular version, I said, why not me put my version? And that is why I decided to write it. Well, battles are not fought by individuals. We always tend to get carried away. Oh, so-and-so got so-and-so award, hero of that battle. He is a hero as a part of the team. He is not the one who went alone with the lance in his hand and charged like olden days. So his heroism is extremely important. But the team that took place, how they operated, I think that is very crucial. And every element has got a role to play in the battle. And the strings of control and directions was at my level. That is why I'm giving you the perspective at the highest level, at the broadest perspective canvas. You know, it's a very vast subject, but I'm trying to make you understand. You know, Himalayas, the way we looked at it mythologically or our culturally, we thought it's going to defend the country, impregnable, our borders of the north. It is also appreciated in a different manner, and attracted adventure seekers, mountaineers. In the past, we talked about Munis and Rishis going there for seeking peace and salvation. The snow-covered mountains in that area were a paradise for the mountaineers. Karakoram areas, that is especially the Karakoram ranges in the east, were absolute paradise for the mountaineers and trekkers. This is also called a third pole. This region, because outside the polar region, it has got the maximum number of glaciers and first-degree peaks, which can offer as a challenge for a mountaineer. Now, first explorer in this area came in 1887. It was Francis Young, Sir Francis Young husband. He came for the first time in this area. Next came Dr. Tom Longstaff in 1910. And surprisingly, a remarkable lady from USA. Her name was Dr. Fanny Bullock Workman. She and her husband, seeking adventure, imagine wearing the clothes and attires of that period in USA. She came and trekked Siachen Glacier twice. First time in 1911 and second in 1912. Remarkable lady. I mean, the stories of her are extremely well recorded. In fact, she, having walked the entire length of the glacier and reached the top, she named the top portion as Indira Col, and that is how the name stuck there. Indira Col was because of the goddess Lakshmi. It is not otherwise. Not many people feel it was given because of Indira Gandhi. Now what happened to this paradise turning into a battlefield? Partition time, there was after the wars, there was a ceasefire agreement signed. And it was vague. The line, delineation of the ceasefire line, which was the boundary, was very vague. Then again, the exercise took place after 71 war. And in 72, Shibla agreement had decided to delineate to the extent possible. Here is a map in front of you. The delineation took place, that you can see that up to a place called NJ 9842. It's a grid reference of the map. But this line of control was, after that, it was undefined because this is the area was not habited, there were no troops, there was no record of the mapping that was available, and it was just vaguely mentioned that from NJ 9842, the border will run northwards. Northwards can be anything. 5 degree left or 5 degree right, it can make a difference. And this is where India, that time, declared this area as a protected area, would not permit any mountaineering expeditions. But at the same time, Pakistan was permitting foreign expeditions along with the liaison officer to come to this area via this Pakistan occupied territory area, and therefore everybody thought Pakistan is in control, they are permitting the expeditions, and accordingly they published the map to say, now the problem comes up. See, now from India 9842, we felt it should go north, means going along the Saltoro range, and that is where the Indira Call is. Pakistanis decided, since they were operating in this area for their expeditions and they're permitting it, they drew the line from NJ 984 to Karakoram Pass, a sanctuary for the mountaineers and adventure seekers became a battleground ever since. Fortunately, India did send 2 military expeditions in this area and realized that this area is under practical control of Pakistan. And Pakistan is likely to occupy the so-called Saltoro range, which is the most crucial range in this area. They are likely to occupy this, and once that's done, or the rest of the area right into the valley, the Shok, hold on, just go back please. You see, afterwards, all these areas, go back to this map only. Now, once this range is occupied, Pakistan denies everything else in this Ladakh Leh sector, and we lose any access to it also. So, preemptively, India decided that we will occupy the Saltoro range, and on the 13th April 1984, we launched military operations and occupied first Bilafondla Pass and the Siala Pass. I think Pakistanis were beaten by a day or so, but they realized the Indian Army has entered. They tried to have a firefight, but they could not succeed. And thereafter, Indian Army extended our post all along the Saltoro range, wherever the heights and passes. So, we remain in control physically. Legally, Pakistanis claimed that we have crossed the claim line, and there onwards, I think the peace was lost in this area. Now, I would like to appreciate what does it mean operating in this area. It's not so simple. Send a battalion there, send 100 people there to man and stop the enemy from here. I think the special aspects of this glacier area, I think I want to, and the settings and the problems it poses for the man and the machine, I will highlight now. But you see now, can you go back to the previous map? What is the before that? You see, this is the Siachen glacier area. We talked about, we know the Siachen. Now, you look, this is the northernmost area of the country. You lose control of this, you permit Chinese in the Siachen and Pakistan occupied territory to be linked up. And once that link up is there, I think there is a big trouble for us. But for occupation of that Saltoro range in 84, the consideration was Pakistan alone. That time we never perceived a threat from China to the extent. Now, nobody visualized it. Nobody thought of it. What will happen after another 20, 50, 100 years? And that is how the importance of this region, I just wanted to show you picture really. Thank you. In fact, it's a wedge between Pakistan and China, and we have got to maintain the pressure at that wedge, keep that wedge with us. You lose that, and that was what was happening in threatened in 87. Now I would like to give you what is it, the conditions there, terrain. This is the place where my divisional headquarters was located, on the junction of Indus and the Zanskar. Zanskar is the blue waters, and Indus is the slightly muddier water. At the junction of it in Ladakh was my divisional headquarters located. And the glacier, next one please. Now this is the battlefield, the glacier. Glacier is something, a running water, flowing river, frozen in action. You can see that. See that. The way you find a river. And this is about, this is the main Siachen glacier. These are the peaks on either side. And next one. To sustain those peaks, the only thing which was available that time, I do not know the conditions, I have not taken excessive interest. This is the helicopter base at the battalion headquarters looking after the main glacier. It's called Kumar. And this is where supplies come, break down, and sent to the various posts. Next one, please. Some of the things are dropped by parachutes also, by Mi-17 helicopters. Look at the living conditions then. This is the typical post. Fellows are sitting and keeping observation and keeping a track of the helicopter movements. Now, here, this is at the Kumar, the observation post for keeping communications with the aircraft. Imagine 24 hours, 12 months, there is just snow. And this is the condition at 15,000. Now, so the peaks, and now you see, this is the summer months. Snow melts. So the shelters which were constructed in the winters, now there is a pillars formed and the shelters continue to remain on top. You cannot do anything. You got to manage to reach the shelter while climbing up that pillar. And just for the protection from the wind chill factor, there is a plastic sheeting which is given for the fellows who are to keep watch all through. Well, this is all right when it's a static post. How does a soldier and a sentry keep himself warm? That was done only by providing a primus stove, one primus stove per soldier, so that he would light it up, stand around it and warm himself, melt snow for drinking water, eat cooked food or semi-cooked food to warm up and eat the food. Now, even early, by the time when I reached there, in fact, it was the initial few years, nothing had got stabilized. The units used to buy primus stoves on their own. I took a decision, it will be given for the government sources. And so battalions came and they had to be provided. But what primitive method? Now, I think to understand that snow is the only thing which is a source of water. Primus stove is the only source for heat and cooking. So you require kerosene. Kerosene must be available at all places. Imagine, things like a matchbox becomes a very critical aspect there at this place. The matchbox must light and ignite the kerosene which is put there for the fire thing. Small things better. Now, in this terrain, when you are traveling from, say, to approach the posts are at a higher route, 18,000 to 22,000. Now, there are certain posts which are available in the narrow valleys where there is a danger of avalanches. So the only time the movement that can take place there is after midnight till early hours of the morning. The moment sun comes up and the thawing takes place, there is more landslide, snow avalanches can take place. That's why movements are only after midnight. I remember at one of these posts when I reached, there was a Mahar battalion. I asked the soldier, I could sit down and chat with him in Marathi. He says, how do you sleep? Up to past midnight, you can't sleep because it's getting cold. Body is tired but can't sleep. After midnight, he says, we can sleep for a couple of hours. And I said, but is it enough? He said, what else can one do? We have to stay here. The cheer with which he replied with a smile when we were sipping a cup of tea, I really admired. Here, the problem is appetite. Higher you go, it's not so easy to say, give him good food, high value food, high calorie food. It is very difficult. That soldier, firstly, you ask him also what he wants. I had a chance to get a permission, a new battalion comes and you provide food to their choice. Like a Jat battalion came and they say, we want virka pinnis. So they wanted laddus. We gave them. After 2 days, he says, I don't like them. We gave them chocolates. We gave them chikki. We gave them mamul cheese. You get anything which was possible in the market. Fruit juices. Every variety available fruit juice packets we used to procure and send it across. Hot drinks, Ovaltine, Bournvita, Horlicks, Maltova, you name it. Everything was pushed ahead. But he said, I don't like it. I don't want to eat it. An average soldier during my time, his tenure was 6 months. He lost 6 to 8 kilos of weight. Can you imagine what it means for his physical efficiency? It is unbelievable. And this is in spite of me trying to get a permission from the army headquarters not to depend on the normal rations that are provided, but having quoted a particular value which is supposed to be given to them. Like, if I give them 3 eggs, he's not going to eat the eggs. If I give them mutton or a chicken, he says, I don't want it. Some posts gave up the non-vegetarian food as a matter of principle. Nothing that could be done. In fact, once I remember, the army commander came with a fresh mutton cut from Udhampur, and he landed at a post. And he told the JCO there, "Saab, आपके लिए मटन लाया है fresh." He says, "साहब, ये यहाँ अनलोड नहीं होगा. यहाँ पर मटन नहीं खाते हम. ये ऐसे ही हेलीकॉप्टर में वापस भेज दो." Army commander was furious. I was supporting that man because science, technology, logic, reasoning doesn't give him answers for his problem. So he depends on the faith. He said, "If I give up meat, I'll survive." I said, "If he feels that way, there is nothing that I would like to do." So such conditions, food is not as palatable. Some of the soldiers get what is called glacial lassitude. A fellow doesn't want to take any precautions. He just, as if you feel he's gone nuts kind of thing. He won't take precautions. And he can get cold injuries. Psychologically, you got to deal with him by the colleagues. I got to get him back to his normal self. Now, however, cooked and pre-cooked foods, well packed, very attractive things which we enjoy getting this dehydrated peas, mutton korma, everything. I procured all that. It's not palatable for a soldier because after a day or two. So what do? It's a problem. Now, when you want to induct a soldier right from the post, it takes time because you can't land him at the post of higher altitude. One has to be moved on foot at 2,000 feet per day, acclimatize up to that place, and continue going these marching stages, and then only he adjusts for that altitude because there is no oxygen, because of the lack of oxygen. Look at this, various other things. Now, the snow, I was visiting along with the brigade commander, who was following me, myself, the brigade commander, and we were visiting the posts. Now, you may say, how was I dressed up in just normally combat dress? There are occasions I meet at a point to dress up in this manner and to visit the soldiers. When I knew for certain that during the period of my visit, the weather will not turn foul. Just to make it a point to the soldier that, look, I am also going to share with you this environment. It is not that always, but there are certain occasions I have made it a point to interact with them that way, in this particular manner. Now, they have got to live there. He wears this clothing, whatever is now you can see them. He wears them while he starts marching first time. And for 6 months he is to wear them. These are one of the finest clothing equipment that we had procured from Europe. And when our teams went there, they were told the life is for 5 years. Because so far, this equipment is to be bought by mountaineers. And they went there for about a month or so. And afterwards, it was kept in there. So for 5 years of expeditions, the mountaineer never required replacement. In our case, imagine 6 months, the man continues to wear that. Look at the condition and you can see the grit on his outside of these coats. It's a very strange. We bought it with that understanding. When I reached there, I found horrible situations. Snow goggles tied up with a thread, gloves torn, because each one had a life fixed. 3 months for the gloves, 6 months for the goggles, 5 years for the coat parka. Now, I thought, but I had to wait to get that thing sorted out. Now, 6 months in such situations, psychological impact on that man is something which is one has to deal with, and unless he is mentally prepared before he is inducted, he is made aware of what he is going to experience. I think there is likely to be problems, I think, psychologically. But in my case, during my time, I never had a problem with any of psychological thing. There are whiteout conditions, like blackout. If they're pitch dark the way you feel it, you get the same feeling when there is a whiteout condition. The visibility is about 5 feet to 10 feet, and beyond that, you lose the sense of horizon also. The flyers would know what are the whiteout conditions, how badly they affect. But for a foot soldier, in a way it is a boon. You can move without being noticed. Enemy cannot observe, but you can get lost. So, in such conditions, an ordinary soldier from any part of the country who came for a tenure, he had to be made a mountaineer. He had to be told the skills of mountaineering, all the ice craft. He had to be acclimatized. He had to be told how in emergency in such conditions, what he can do. He had to be told the survival aspect of it. And having prepared these features, emotionally he had to be encouraged to, take it with a cheer. Well, there are certain heights and above 18,000 we experienced. Everybody cannot take it. There are some human beings, or some people can adapt to it, some people don't. Now, this is the aspect of the human beings. What about the machines and equipment? The guns which we had, the finest guns, maybe old, right? 130 millimeter guns. But they could fire with the charge super at a range of 37 kilometers and support my battle. But I think the artillery, or people who can understand the trajectory and effect of a missile or anything traveling in the air for 37 kilometers, the impact of the meteorological conditions which are not recorded, what it could be. So we found, even want to record a target, see wherever it is for the guns to fire, 40 to 50 rounds were taken to just engage the target. 40 to 50 rounds. Because you had to follow 3 rounds at a time, hoping that you will see the fall of at least 1 round. And after that, having got it our target, then another 50 to 60 rounds to really deal with the target. Imagine the expenditure of ammunition that we had to go. That time there were no meteorological tables available at all. I don't know whether they are available now. There were no range tables for 37 kilometers at super high altitudes. So everything was a trial and error every time a target appeared. That's all. Just imagine that. Helicopters could not take off very early. The early morning servicing in that bitter cold, it was not so easy to tell the maintenance crew, finish it off early in the morning and we want to launch a sortie. No. It takes time in the morning because of the various conditions prevailing. Helicopters and aircraft take off and things get delayed.
I'm going to interject for 1 minute because we are going to run short of time. But I'd like to have you focus on the next part of it because time is of the essence. But I'd like you to come to your leadership, decision making, etc. That we could all hear about.
Just before going there, I think the temperatures here are something unbelievable. Daytime, in summer months, -10 to -30 at night, and winter temperatures -20 in the daytime, and -40, 50 at night. And if the wind chill factor, it is enormous. problem. Now, I will just now come down to the operational aspects of physical war battles. See this feature. This is what it looked like from Pakistani side. This is what it looked from our side. This is what is called now the Bana top, what Pakistanis called it the Qaid post. This was established by them in the beginning of 1987. I also reached that area as a 1987, the beginning. And when I was taking over the responsibility of the division, my predecessor said, Ramesh, your first task is to eliminate this post. Very easier said, because it just had happened of last few days of his command. So there's nothing that he could have done, and he had to hand over the responsibility to me. Next. Now that post having been occupied, there's a neighboring post which was accessible only by a cheetah helicopter. No helicopter could land or evacuate casualties or provide supplies. And similar way, there were two posts like this. Now, so what the task was, next one. This is the post as seen from our side. I just could fly somewhere close by from this side. And there are two crevasses in the route. So with the crevasses to be avoided or crossed over, a force had to go up on top and attack. I think the discussions took place between me, the brigade commander, and the CO. We realized that we had not initially occupied this height because of the dangerous the climbing problems and maintaining a post at 22,000. So nobody had thought of it. Now it became a challenge to capture this post. Now how did we do it? I think initially we said, what is there on top? Yes, there is a machine gun of Pakistanis. But what do we do? How do we handle it? We thought of sending a patrol under a young officer. Second lieutenant just recently commissioned from the Indian Army Academy. And he was there at the base of this. You see this? This is somewhere in this side, there was a post where they were there. And he was told, make an attempt, climb up this fissure, and just see whether you can make out what is there in the Pakistani side. My God. It's easy. CO also briefed him, commanding officer. The young man, this is what you got to do. He went there. It is to his credit. With all the mountaineering skill that is required, he climbed up. He took 6 people along with him. He went up. He established somewhere on this side and tried to go ahead. He was not told to deal with the fire or fight or wrong. But a young spirit, young boy, he said, I have come here, let me go ahead. I can do something more than what I have been given told to do. He went ahead, and those 4 fellows were just shot up. They shot up, and their bodies could be seen from the battalion headquarters, because this place could be seen from the battalion headquarters. But he ensured, by sacrificing his life along with the 3 others, that this can be climbed. So we decided, now that it is established, it can be climbed. Now we have got to create a force, launch on this site. Also, the dead bodies had to be retrieved. There is no question of trying to leave them just because they're dead there. The Subda Major used to tell me every day, "Saab, laashein wapas lani hai." Haan, sir. So a force had to be created. So the base camp, there there were 120 people, the battalion which was manning this glacier. And so we had to, before launching this, I'm going to tell you, this Rajiv Pandey's mission, success, but a disaster in a certain way, loss of life. Now, there was a new army commander coming on the 6th of June. So we didn't have helicopter support very much to try and see how to replenish these 2 posts on the other side of this height, which were running short of kerosene, matchboxes, rations. And because of about a month and a half, there was no helicopter had gone there. Now, along with the army commander, 6 helicopters came, cheetahs, with the 12 pilots, under a full colonel, a fellow called Tom Dulath. And that day, the situation was very desperate. So I called all the 12 pilots and I said, boys, this is the situation at these 2 posts. The boys are going to freeze to death because there is no kerosene, and so one place there's no matchbox also. Will you undertake this mission? He said, sir, as per our assessment, there will be 60% casualties. That the 6 of the helicopters will not come back. And just to add, something, to rub it into me, for you to drop, sir, jo hukum. Meaning, you give orders what you want to say, but please understand the 6 out of the 10 sorties will not come back. Now, look at the commander's dilemma. What do I do? Do I let the 30 men freeze to death? Do I task these people to go and risk their lives to deliver the supplies? Time available for me to make a decision was only few seconds. And all the 12 eyes were looking at my eyes. What is he going to say? I think I never had that discomfort ever again in my life of facing those 12 eyes, 12 people staring at me and waiting to see what orders I give. I just said, boys, I understand there is a risk. If those boys are permitted to be frozen to death, I'll feel as hurt. Will you take a chance? Will you take a risk? I'll keep on firing on the enemy post with the guns and mortars and make an effort. I think I will appreciate it. It is no question of saying go. I just told him, I will appreciate it if you can do it. Understand what is at stake. They again looked at me and the colonel said, sir, hum jayenge, inshallah, hum wapas aayenge. I admired the leadership of that colonel. He himself led those 4 helicopters. He undertook the mission of supplying. And for Army Commander, I had kept 2 helicopters. The 4 had gone. So we went subsequently to the battalion headquarters and waited there. I was not very much communicating with the Army Commander because I was so troubled. What if any of these helicopters doesn't come back? What happens? Who is going to answer for that, the death of that pilot also? I was just making bare conversation with him, and my ears and eyes were looking at the horizon, whether the helicopters are returning after the first sortie. Once I saw the sorties having come back, I said, my God, what a pressure which I could not cope with, perhaps, but I had to cope with it because I had to I couldn't have said that, look, buddy, I cannot take this pressure. No, but it was weighing on me so heavily. I think I felt something like a crying with a joy when I saw the helicopters coming back. And we knew that we can now replenish this post in a certain manner, also induct the troops for undertaking this operation. We had run short of the helicopter support.
Dad, sorry, you'll have to move faster.
Okay.
Time is of the
Okay.
essence.
Okay. Now, we launched an what is the next operation we launched was Op Rajiv. I think it was 120 people who were based. We asked them, who all are prepared to come and volunteer? We want 60 people to go and retrieve the bodies and capture this post. All 120 men put up their hand. We selected 60. We wanted 30, but I said we'll induct 60 and at least 30 will survive there and will undertake the operation. This induction took place. 300 helicopter sorties were used to induct this 60 men, bringing out 30, their ammunition, their clothing, rations, everything, weapons, and they were launched at the end of June under a command of one Major, Varinder Singh, and I think he motivated them, and he himself climbed along with those 30 people on top, and he was told, capture of this post is very vital. And the day, night he climbed up, he found his weapons got jammed, he could not fire because of the moisture. He could not communicate to anybody because the diaphragm was getting frozen. There was no communication the whole night. Next morning when I went there, the battalion quarter, his commanding officer said, weapons not firing at night, getting jammed. So he told them, light the primer stove, heat up the rifles and the machine guns and try and go for the second night. It didn't happen. Same thing problem. Thereafter, third morning when I reached there, this officer said, I cannot carry on at a height of 22,000 for one more night. Either I come back or you tell me what to do. So the decision was whether to launch a daylight attack, which was very dangerous, or pull them back. I had to take again a decision on the spot to say, you attack into the daylight at 11:30, we'll support to the extent what is possible. And we wish for the best because you cannot come back and hope to climb back again. They were successful. In the last wave of attack was Naib Subdar Bana Singh, who was initially at the base camp as a storekeeper and who had volunteered. He was sent at the third phase of the attack, and the attack was successful. And he was the winner of the PVC. I wonder whether I would say that any of those 30 men didn't deserve that PVC. Each one had dared, each one had volunteered, each one had risked and suffered the same thing. It's a question of which phase of attack who went. Otherwise, it was something which I think I admire the courage of all the 30 boys under the leadership. Now, this happened. Now I knew that Pakistan is having lost this post. They are going to retaliate. And because it cannot take it, this loss of post. Now, where would it take place? The attack, counter-attack, we didn't know. You see now here is the Bilafondla Pass. The feature we had captured was this. Now, this is the Bilafondla Pass, which was held by us. But the physically possible there were only 2 posts, with about 10 to 12 people each. We were not certain when and what time the attack will take place. It was unpredictably in a daylight of a morning, early morning, we found major intense shelling and the Pakistanis attacking. I think it was very, I understood now why they launched a daylight attack. It is after reading the Pakistani account. They had lost the night looking for the track, they failed. And they said, now we have reached there, let us attack. So in fact, from outside, so it was a massacre as far as they were concerned. They undertook the attack. but we fired intensely with these 130 millimeter guns, and that attack was repulsed. But I knew that it is not going to be the end of it. That night again will be the second attack. Now, that night, we briefed everybody. You know that when you make a plan, the commander takes into consideration what are the various factors. But the commander cannot be functional or, doing the job of every soldier in the ground. He has to brief his teammates. He has to brief his commanding. As a general, I had to brief the commanding officer. I had to discuss with the company commanders. I said, look, this is what it is. Should this happen, you do this. If this happens, you do this. And I think once having made a plan, you've got to then pull back and not keep on nudging. What happened now? Is it all right? Is it not all right? Then you've got to trust your team. You've got to then leave it. Leave it to them to handle. Leave them take to the initiative or take a decisions to alter. And they would know, they must know that if they change anything with a good intention and things go wrong, you don't blame them because it is something as a part of the game. The Pakistanis launched 3 attacks, one after the other. The fourth, and after the third attack, when I reached the headquarters, we were desperate because we had run out of ammunition. I had just 80 rounds of 130 millimeter guns. I thought there is a failure of my staff to replenish the ammunition. But every night we are firing around 1,000 rounds of these guns to support this battle at Bilafonla, to support our troops at Bilafonla. The ammunition of the Ladakh was exhausted. There was no more ammunition left. And I said, if there is further attack, we had no way to checkmate it. Fortunately, we realized the Pakistanis having suffered so intense casualties, although they had come up to 15, 20 meters from our front lines. Parvez Musharraf was the brigade commander at that time. He said, pull back. He lost nerves. This is also called, you can say, why he lost nerves? God no. Initially, he gave orders, one next battalion to go in. No. After 1 hour, when he heard abuses of the troops in the contact, he said, pull back. Now, I think commanders at every level, as I said, Tom Dulat, the commander of those helicopter pilots, what is his responsibilities? Commanders of the field in the forward areas, what are their responsibilities? I was the commander, the overall commander, and everything was left to me. So one thing, if you make a plan and give it away to other people, your subordinates, your colleagues are aware, you have to leave them to implement and enforce it. The burden of the commander who is a lonely person is something which I have experienced to the utmost. Now, after winning this battle, then the visitors started coming. First was the then Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir along the Corps Commander, then the Defense Minister, K.C. Pant, then Shivraj Patil, who was the RRM, and each of these visits, when it took place, I utilized them to the biggest advantage. When especially Shivraj Patil came to visit me, I made him see that what is the condition of the clothing and equipment of the troops as they are. It was something normally not done. You put up a show for a dress and attire. But I said, my troops will dress up with whatever they have got. And when he saw that, and I told him that these coats are handed over every 6 months to the next lot, he was aghast. So he gave a direction there. You will decide the life of this thing. It will be only for one cycle for the soldier. That is the time he gave permission for the changing the ration scale to say procure whatever is available in the market. He was extremely helpful. I must appreciate that. Then, at the end of all these actions, awards were given. And it is something so heartening. For my division, the award winners were called at the command headquarters, Udhampur, and they were introduced to the Prime Minister who had come. These are all the PVC and MVCs and Veer Chakra, and also the Uttam Yuddha Seva medals. You can see firstly that Bana Singh standing at the back. And next is the Major Chatterjee of the Gurkhas. This is Tom Dulat. And the last one standing here is a Brigadier Nugyal. He was given Uttam Yuddha Seva medal. And I think there were about 200 plus awards to the division. I don't think as the Div Commander I could have expected anything better as far as the recognition of this. But unfortunately, as I said, the whole action, the whole intensity of it, and the whole importance of it was never permitted. I can just read out the total awards that come. Paramveer Chakra 1, Mahavir Chakras 5, Uttam Yuddha Seva medals 4, Veer Chakras 16, Yuddha Seva medals 7, Sena medals gallantry 34, and mention and dispatches 18, and Chief of Army Staff and Army Commanders commendation cards over 200. I think we were proud. I think as a division, we thought we earned something. I tried to condense most of the things, but I wanted to highlight the important aspects. The question we will is, why does a soldier fight? Why does he risk his life? There is a question which I always posed. I think it's a subject of even perhaps a research. But what I found was the hackneyed terms which one always used, Naam, Namak, Nishan, Izzat. When you say that bodies had to be retreated, volunteers come up to say, I will come and go and retreat it. When he said, he doesn't want to be seen as a coward by his colleagues. Izzat. Naam, Paltan ka naam, it cannot be badnaam. Now, I think he never thinks of that time, my family is there, what would I do? Should I risk my life? He is obsessed that he would rather risk his life for the sake of his colleague, his comrade, his person of his team, but not run away, not give way, not worry about his life. And not one incident I come across during my tenure, there are 22 months, where people have shirked with him. Mind you, people who had no responsibilities, like the Bana top from where we sit. Later on, there was an attempt. So we wanted a volunteer to go and cut their ropes, other side. An artillery officer who was there, he said, I will go. Nobody had him. It was not his job. He went. He got shot up. The body fell down on the Pakistani side. Now there was a panic on the post. This body has to be retrieved. Who will go and do it? There was an ASC officer, an attachment, Army Service Corps, fresh from the academy. He said, I will go along with the other 3 people. He went and retrieved that body. Importance for the colleague and their well-being, that officer got a Veer Chakra for getting it. But why does it happen? How does it happen? Why? I think it's a matter of, to my mind, these are the issues. Person, if he knows that a decision has been made, a mission has been set for him, he will stay put. Like this Bilafon La Paz, there were 2 posts of 10, 12 each. Continuous shelling and attacks were taking place. One post commander was shot up with a missile. He died. His colleagues and otherwise pulled back his body, somebody else took over and continued to fight. Why? How does it happen? It is something which I think is a matter of pride for us. This is what our Indian Army soldier is. Soldiering is a very different profession where, there is a pride in it. and izzat is one of the biggest factor. That is all that I would like to say and end my talk.
I think most of us are a little bit shell-shocked just listening to it. I just want to, before we open this to question answers with the audience, I was thinking, Anjali, I thought I'd ask you, you're his daughter, you're also a writer, an intellectual. What did it feel like writing this down? I mean, we could feel the silence as we were listening to the story. How did it feel living this, both as an Indian citizen and especially as a daughter?
Shahana did mention in that little brief introduction, I mean, we knew Dad was commanding, and we knew the tensions that were there. But honestly, and there are many from the armed forces here, none of this carries on to our dining tables. I remember getting married and then hearing, all kinds of comments about the enemy across the border, how they should be slaughtered and punished. And I just don't remember those conversations on our dining tables. I don't ever remember hatred for the enemy. And I think that is something that is there in the forces, where there is a huge respect for the other. I mean, it is, after all, an enemy, and you're doing your job, but it is respect that you have. Writing this book forced me to get into details that Dad had kept really suppressed for a long time. And the nature of this was at many points pretty overwhelming. I don't know how many of you have read the book and how many of you will go on to reading it, but most people would only hear his story if it was told in the way it happened. So there were lots of arguments, I have to say, because he would say, this is really not what I was feeling then. You've written this, I wasn't feeling that. And I tell him, okay, tell me, Dad, what you were feeling so I can write it. And he said, you'll never understand. I said, I'm trying, Dad, I'm trying. And he said, you won't understand, nobody understands. And then we'd have 3 days of silence, actually. And then we'd pick it up again after 3 days. And I know that while so many people told me, oh, it must have been very cathartic for him, I know it was extremely tough for him as well. It didn't help that, my mother also has a fantastic memory on most of these issues. And my mother would add, and she'd force him to also recall, rethink. It was actually just learning something, something that you felt you knew. And then to figure out that you really didn't. You didn't know the enormity of it at all was a big one, was really pretty big. My son said it, and I think that's what it felt like. For my sons, my father has been a hero. I mean, they've always looked up at him. He's got the awards. He's fought these battles that they've just generally heard of. Both of them actually said that, having read the book, they discovered the human being behind the hero. And I felt that I tossed between these two entities of my father. Yeah.
I think a little while back, somebody asked General Kulkarni, did you take notes while it was happening? And he kind of looked at this lady and thought for a while, and he said, every minute is fresh in my mind even to date. So I can imagine what it would have been like to hear this and write it down as a writer and as his daughter.
When you say that the events are fresh in my mind, In fact, they were troubling me all these years. Something like getting like hallucinations of that scenes passing in front of my mind. Wake up at night, suddenly that helicopter pilot's briefing scene would come up. Sometimes when there is briefing for the final attack of the things would come up. These scenes would flash in front of my mind off and on. And I was getting troubled and I wanted to put it aside, I wanted to forget it. And when my daughter continued to insist, write, to recount was easy because it was fresh. It is as if I'm seeing them. I can still see the faces in front of me, each one of them. I didn't want to remember. I wanted to forget it because they were weighing on my mind. The people who lost. Imagine one day when I go to the post commander says, "Sir, there is a dead body lying for the 8 days. Helicopter hadn't come. Will you take it?" No. Imagine the dead body being loaded in a helicopter along with you, bring it. What is that impact you have on you? It's something which one wants to forget. But I recount it and I gave it to him.
So you'll find lots of lines, spoken lines in the book. And I asked him, I said, "You are sure that these are the words? Because we are quoting it. I'm not, saying what you remember of it." He said, "Those are the words. Those are exact." I mean, this line, "Inshallah hum wapis aayenge," by the helicopter pilots and Colonel Tom Dulat is something that we've heard. He remembered it like crystal clear. There are lots of accounts, by the way, of even the Rajiv Pandey's reconnaissance mission. Because of the vague recording of a lot of this period, there are at least 3 accounts which mention 3 different numbers of that made up the patrol. And he was very clear. He was clear because of the number of the bodies that could be seen from the headquarters. And he said, "I know those are the ones who died. I know these many came back. Total it up, this is the number."
So we have about 10 minutes before we wrap up at 8. So I think that we would like to open it to the audience. And Lekha, if we can have some lights in the audience. There is a mic there, and because this is going to be recorded, it will make it easier for us. If you would just come up to the mic and ask your question from there. If you raise your hands, I will indicate. Yes, sir, please. Over there. I'll request you to keep the question or the comment brief.
Good evening, sir. My name is Krishna. It was a very fascinating account of the Battle of 1987, which we understand is termed as Operation Rahul or Operation Rajiv. I think that's what it's termed by the Indian historians. What I would like to ask you is the earlier one that you mentioned in 1984 when we captured the Siachen Heights, which is called Operation Meghdut. How would you contrast the strategy for that versus the one in 1987?
At 1984 was the time when it was a question of preempting Pakistanis reaching the passes. And so helicopters were used for dropping certain people. Some people were made to march along the glacier. And once you reached a dominating place, then the other side has got very little chance to throw you out. A man and a dog at a height, I think, can be the biggest challenge to. After all, even the Banap, the Kayat post which we captured, how many people were there? Just a few. But they were good enough to make the whole division run in circles. Same way, 84 we could manage. And that is why there are some young, gallant officers at that time. Sometimes you will not believe it. Also my namesake. That time he was Captain Sanjay Kulkarni of the Kumaon Regiment. Yes, there are always there some people who will do achieve something phenomenal. He stuck there and established a post. So establishing a post is the one thing. But when you are attacked in sizable numbers, I think the type of battle or encounter that takes place, and the type of tactics or the planning that has to be done is a very different type of thing.
Is there any other question here?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much. It's a wonderful evening listening to the entire lively account. I mean, I can feel that it's difficult for you to forget that. I feel after going back from here, it will be equally difficult for me also to forget some of these things few years later. One small question here. These are genuinely wonderful things for us as citizens of the country. What could be a good mechanism to have truthful accounts of many of these things that have happened if we have to learn that today we are lucky to listen to you, but otherwise which kind of sources, where should we look forward to have genuinely truthful account of these? Any advice or recommendation, anything of that kind?
I understand and appreciate your interest which you are showing. Battles or the combat or the actions have got various shades or various aspects. One is an individual courage and bravery, the grit, and that is at absolutely the frontline level. What you can call it as a man with a bayonet kind of level. It requires an entirely different, and accounts of that would be seen as an individual valor accounts. Then there are junior leaders like that Rajiv Pandey. What he does, his company commander, when he attacks, they are accounts of commanders, junior commanders in action, where they're physically, under fire. And they have made a plan and they're trying to maintain the force, their troops' morale and push, then edging them forward. Come on, push on. Doesn't matter. One fellow has fallen down. Doesn't matter. Come on, rest of the lot, get along. That leadership is of a different nature. There is a different accounts of that nature, where small account actions, but brilliant. Then there are the planning, the leadership at a certain higher level. A lonely plan. You plan in the operations room on the maps. It has to be translated on the ground. It requires a different way to look at it, create a team. How does the commander create a team? How does he educate and enlighten the team? How does he trust that team? And how does he let them go and perform separately at various places? There are such accounts of a different nature, even the various battles and wars which we have fought. There are books on the subject written by various commanders, and each one will give a combination of these particular type of actions.
If I can just take that, I mean, just because I was writing this, I also tried to access other books. And it's very interesting that each one's perspective is very different. Each one's goal is different. The problem, I think, when Indian writings have happened is either to glorify to the extent that becomes, unreal. The aim is that I want to get across the bravery and the valor. And sometimes I think that almost does a disservice. I mean, my father is really rattled with Bollywood depicting the army. And we are right now actually at a point that we are struggling with that decision. We never expected to. The aim was to write this so that everybody gets to know this period of history. We were attempting to put down history. And then to be approached by Bollywood was something that just threw us off. My first conversation with the producer was, he's not going to agree. And the worry was, I mean, my father's busy looking at the authenticity of the gun and telling me that cannot be put on his shoulder because it's a rocket launcher, and he would walk off in disgust. So there is a problem of authenticity in a big way, and I'm using Bollywood just because it's more relatable, but it's also there in the written accounts. And again, I think it's very hard. So he is the one who experienced it. And my mother would always say that, you are the one with the words, you are the one who writes. Why don't you help him write? And I do believe my father's really very articulate. I mean, you could see that when he was talking. But I think writing is another whole thing where the flow has to be there. And again, I bring back the word authentic. And I think it's very hard for people who have actually been in action to put down what they have felt in words. And then when it becomes a third person who's interpreting it and putting it down, it just goes in all directions. So we are actually at a stage when these accounts that you're talking about are not easily available. And so I believe that we've made a little dent in that direction.
Also, you must have noticed that I have not in my book anywhere given account of the actual battles physically taking place at a lower level, at the frontline level, because I was not part of it. Now, if I would ask a soldier, he will say, I am the one who fought it, or whatever it be. It will be his perception, and unfortunately, he may not be able to write it. But it will be wrong for me to assume how he fought that battle also. That's why I've given perception at my level, planning and conduct at my level, decision making at my level, and what I physically experienced at every stage.
You know, I'm reminded of Wordsworth's, the poet Wordsworth's advice on how to write poetry. He said that it has to be a felt emotion, so it has to be a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions. But he goes on to say, recollected in tranquility. So I think we needed that interim years before a true account can be said from whosever perspective it is. I think we have time for just one more question. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much to both of you for bringing out this book. Thank you, sir. My question was really about this moment of defeat. You mentioned that moment when the commander on the opposite side accepted defeat and decided to pull back. And we all know that war is as much about, you know, technology, ammunition, and manpower, but it's also about psychological defeat. And especially in tough terrains, there have been wars like the Vietnam War, etc., where, you know, a much lesser force or a much lesser technological force has won. So I was just curious to know, from your point of view, what was that moment of defeat? Like, how do you plan for a moment when the enemy will concede defeat?
You know, losing a battle is just something which is a matter of enormous disgrace for the commander. For the troops, in any case, who has failed, the troops or their commanders, is very difficult. And what decisions made them success and what decisions made them failures. And that is where you attribute who is to blame for the failures, and that attribution takes place. If I would have lost this battle, I would have been court-martialed. That is a simple thing. There's nothing short of it. Why didn't Musharraf get court-martialed? There is a reason. He was appointed as the brigade commander, personally approved by the President of Pakistan and the Chief of the Pakistan Army. Specially chosen because he was known to have expertise in the polar warfare. He was a commando. He was having a gritty person. He was specially selected and sent as the brigade commander. 2 months just before I reached. And here it was my army commander thought, I must go and command the division. I had no such expertise. I am not a mountaineer. I am not a tough guy with a physically or mentally, maybe, yes. I mean, looking at me, even at any stage in my life, nobody would have called me, I'm a toughie kind of thing. But mentally, I'm absolutely mule. Okay. Now what happens is, when you lose, he was covered up. Musharraf was covered up because he was a favorite man for the chief of the Pakistan Army and the president of Pakistan also. That is how he survived to launch another attack in Kargil. And in his biography, he says that I had to retrieve my name and I had to launch at Kargil. Well, if he would have succeeded here, there would have been no Kargil. But there would have been no Kulkarni also.
Maybe you would have been President Kulkarni then.
So just to extend on your part, because I think, I don't know whether Dad totally answered it, but I just know again and again that for the army, it is about a mission and it's about a task that needs to be accomplished. And this I hear again and again all through the writing of the book, which is the mission was to protect the country's borders. And that is something that is so loosely used, right? Protect the country's borders. But again and again, he would say that had we, so victory was in being able to make sure the map of India did not change. And so there was also, he does talk of the thrill that he experienced on the helicopters coming back. And this was just beautifully captured by my brother, who's a man of very few words as far as letters go. It's like a single pager that my parents would get. And my mother, figured in her massive clearing up that happens in their Pune home now and then, a letter that my brother had written the day I think they were able to, he was there for Op Rajiv, I think. And he talks about dad wanting to do a victory dance. And I cannot imagine that. But I think it is really never in material, specific terms. It's almost entirely emotional, if I'm not mistaken. Most victories, there is just an adrenaline of a different kind that happens.
Apart from the elation, personal elation, perhaps you have not failed. That is one of the biggest things. Because there was a stage in these battles. The chief of the army staff said, Ramesh, if you lose this glacier, you give up the command and I wanted to do something else. I felt, my God, if I lose this battle, that means even the army chief feels that I'm likely to lose this battle. It was enormously hurting. How can I fail? After all, you've got a mission. And this, after all, the commanders, higher commanders, will plan. Should things go wrong, then what? Naturally. But as for me is concerned, I was so hurt when he said, if you lose the glacier, I will give you some other force and this is what you will do. My God, losing a battle is something different. That is, firstly, that is a personal thing, okay. But the men will say, under his leadership, we lost. You don't want me to call that way, that you had failed as a leader. To the men, to your colleagues, to your own self. That is the way the failure is to be looked at.
I think that was beautiful. And I think that while we can carry on this conversation pretty much forever, it is past time. And I'd just like to end this evening by acknowledging how beautiful the emotions have been while journeying with him through the stories, not just of what happened externally, but witnessing what General Kulkarni felt, to see the man, the human being behind the soldier, behind the commander. And I think that once again I am stumped by the limitation of words, labels and definition as we find ourselves thrilled, sorrowful, regretful, victorious, proud in so many ways, all because of one half-an-hour lecture. Thank you so much, General Kulkarni. Thank you, Anjali. And thank you, Mrs. Kulkarni, for coming to Bangalore and sharing your experiences with us. I hope that you will read the book and get more details in calmer frame of mind and make what you will of the true account that Sir spoke about just a little while back. Good night, and let us have a wonderful Independence Day tomorrow.
Shahana, I've got to interject. I'm sorry, I'm going to just take 1 minute. I know it's extending and beyond the thanks. My father forgot to mention that the 6th of June, when Colonel Tom Dullat undertook the mission, was Mom and Dad's 25th wedding anniversary. He hadn't been able to actually wish Mom, and Mom would be pretty used to such things. Our birthdays were not necessarily when our parents were together. Mom was the one who was always there, made life really normal for us. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Dad actually is thinking about it. I think he said he had it at the back of his mind, but really in the immediate front were 40 men who were going to die. And so I don't think Mom featured that much in front. My mother and I went and had pav bhaji, which was a big thing for us. I know why this is a big deal, because I know how 25th wedding anniversaries are celebrated. And I know that my parents' one was really pretty unique. So wanted to just remind on that note.
I would like to make one correction for what my daughter said. My wife was with me in the famous Battle of Vajrashakti. She had just come from Bombay and was with me. And she used to see me early morning, 6:30, fly off to the glacier, come back at 4 o'clock, and get onto the telephone, cursing, abusing, and shouting at the various higher headquarters. And once he said, "Why are you using the foul word?" I was using the 4-letter word. But I said, just leave it. We are dealing with a life and death issues. It's a crisis situation and the people on top are not understanding. I'll use any language, just don't worry, just ignore. She heard that. Next, I remember when the Pakistanis attacks were coming, first night she heard, oh, there is something, attack held up. Second night she heard attack held up. Good. Third night, when I had finished and come back, there was a telephone message at 11:30 at night. "Sir, I think we have lost a post." I said, "My God, lost a post? That means the front line is gone." After a while he said, "Sir, I think the front line and officer has come, Pakistani, and is asking for ropes and other reinforcement. And he is saying on the radio, which was we had been able to home on." I said, "I'll send these people, I'll finish off this Indian army here." This conversation was relayed to me. And when they said post is lost, she saw my face, and she heard it. "What happened?" He said, "I think we have lost a post." She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Nothing. Nothing that I can do now at 11:30 night in my headquarters. Even if I was in the front line very close, you cannot influence the battle at the last minute." I said, "Let the sunlight come up. At first light, I will go to the glacier. I will take a decision of what to do." She has seen the trauma, the pressures of a commander. Yeah. And she supported.
Shall we just stand for a minute in tribute to those who live this life even today, every day? Thank you all. Have a good night.